This is awesome. But there is a catch. Get it? No, really, there is a thing that can be improved. After many months, the foretold Jax ASU has finally arrived. And it has arrived as a full package. From a new model and new animations to new voice and even a new theme. Like, I actually forgot that was even possible. I mean, Caitlyn did get a new theme, but it's because she was heavily tied into Arcane, so it made sense for the promotion. On the other hand, as an example, Ahri didn't get one. So when I saw it drop for Jax, I was very surprised. Anyway, because Jax went through this whole thing, there is a lot that we can talk about. Which will also include explaining some of the lore behind his voice lines. But first, let's start with his design. When it comes to purely his visuals, I have to say I liked his version in Legends of Runeterra a little bit more. There, he had a little bit more detail, but it makes sense why those didn't make it into League of Legends. It's because in League, the champion is a lot smaller on your screen, so you would have to cramp it up with details. So sticking to strictly purple-ish colors does a lot for him. I saw that some people were sad that he lost some of the golden armor he had in Legends of Runeterra. Which I totally understand because gold is very iconic for the entirety of Shurima. But remember, that specific tie is to the Shuriman Empire. But Jax comes from Icathia. And yes, I will still pronounce it Icathia because I've been pronouncing it this way for 5 years. I don't want to start all over again. Anyway, Icathia was one of the rivals of the Shuriman Empire. So on the other hand, it would make sense why the Icathians would try and avoid gold. Because it could be related to the ascended god warriors of the Shuriman Empire. So I do understand both of the designs. And speaking of redesigning something that might be related to lore, Jax's new design also leaned into a brand new aspect of him. The sci-fi mask. You see, the mask has been a strange thing from the very beginning. We simply never learned what it even is. It was never explained anywhere and it never even appeared in the lore. It is something that simply stayed there since the original design. And it seems like even Riot themselves were confused about it. At the start, they tried to turn it into a medieval mask. That was during the times when Jax was a massive mystery. So giving him a many-eyed mask enhanced that mysterious fantasy. But then, during the New Dawn cinematic, which came out 9 years ago, they gave the mask sci-fi elements. It's especially the overly clean metal with the blue details. So from that point on, Jax started looking a little bit more like an alien. But then, years later, we got the entire story about Icathia, and Ezreal started teasing that Jax was a sand troll, which meant that the mask was kinda just random. Obviously, it has to be some kind of a mystical item from the kingdom of Icathia. But the sci-fi elements started drifting more and more from the fantasy that we knew. And what didn't help was that in Wild Rift, Jax actually got the exact same mask he had in the New Dawn cinematic 9 years ago. I mean, it looks cool in HD, but it still doesn't really fit the fantasy universe that we know. And so finally, a few years later, Legends of Runeterra arrived to give the mask some unified fantasy feels. Or at the very least, it fits into the universe just as much as something like the 7 Lenses of Insight. And then finally, in League of Legends, we got the final touch-ups that just unified everything. In a way, the Legends of Runeterra design looks a little bit more deserty, because the mask is also covered in cloth. But who knows, maybe the League design is what Jax looks like when he's just out there on the travels, when he just finally leaves the desert. I mean, there his mask is not covered. With that said, you don't want to know about one of the original concept arts where he was exposed. Honestly, that design would have been amazing and really scary. When we then look at the in-game model, I have to say, this is a really good one. It is very close to the original, but it is just better in every way. They even kept his goofy dance. His animations are also so much more expressive. I mean, we all love how funny all the stretching can get. But also, I just love all the details, such as the flicker of light when you empower your hit. But by far, the best upgrade he got are the sound effects. It is not just random sounds the studio put together in 2009. Which, by the way, yes, that is how old the original sound effects were. Instead, it is all the ringing of metal followed by a trail of fire. I mean, it really makes it feel like you are beating people with a metal pipe. Just don't bring back the meme. Speaking of which, the last light of Icathia looks amazing. I'm obviously talking about the lamp of magical fire that has the ability to repel the void. But it also has spikes on it and it can be used as a real weapon. And lastly, yes, Jax can actually fish in a river. And whenever you use that emote, there is a chance that you may catch 1 gold, which you would get anyway just by standing around. Next on the list of things we should mention are the skins. Of course, it should go without saying that all of these are amazing. But you are going to notice the upgrades more on the older skins rather than the newer ones. Because the newer skins were developed with the idea that a change might happen in the future. So there, they were able to just kinda stretch the model around to fit the new proportions. So skins like Mecha Kingdom Jax or Godstaff Jax are still great, but they are nearly identical to what he had before. So in contrast, for example, Jaximus looks like an awesome gladiator. Though I have to say, I like the helmet of the original a little bit more. Also, they had to change the weapon from an axe because they needed something hollow for the light. But there is also the new Angler Jax, which was very obviously inspired by the new version in Wild Rift. And also Vandal Jax, who looks insane. Like, this could very easily be a pentakill skin. And we even got a new Mighty Jax playing for his favorite hockey team. But of course, the one that stands out is PAX Jax. The original PAX Jax was tied to some black market scamming, and it still looks really good here. But this time around, to get a grip on its market, Riot also released the Neo PAX Jax skin. A recolor version that is not nearly as cool as the original. Which also goes for, I believe, 200 Mythic Essence. Which is double of the other PAX Neo skins when they came out. So, take it for what it is, I guess. But that's really all that's worth mentioning when it comes to the skins. Lastly, before we dive into the voice lines, let's bring up his theme. It's good. It's a really cool battle theme with some mystical elements and almost Ionian-like themes, which in one way could be underlying Jax's travels around the world, but I'm pretty sure it is also supposed to represent the mystical magical elements of the Kingdom of Icathia. Because remember, they were quite different from Shurima, just like how something like Nazuma is different from the Empire. I also like how during one part the theme goes a little bit quieter and more dramatic, because I assume that represents the moment Icathia revealed its dark secret. But overall, I just really appreciate the heroic value. It really makes Jax feel like a powerful warrior. And I appreciate that this theme is where the smile came from. But this is where we get into the voice lines. Simply said, the voice lines are badass. But in many ways, that is where it begins and where it ends. I know I'm gonna say something that will sound like a hot take, because if you go into the comment section, people just really like the voice lines. But I do have a thing or two to say about this one. You see, it makes sense why Jax would be simply badass. He is one of the very few mortal beings in existence that managed to down an ascended god warrior in a one-on-one combat. That's when he actually held a real weapon. So it makes sense for him to be kinda cocky and above the situation. But my issue is that he's like this all the time. Even during the moments where I would imagine him getting a little bit more serious. Though I have to say that this is really just the only issue I have with the entirety of Jax. It is awesome that they brought back the original voice actor. It is amazing that they kept his voice line referencing the kid.
Bravest hero I ever knew was just a kid. Here's to you, champ.
I mean, of course they did that. I can't imagine a universe where they would just forget about that one. But sometimes, during all of that, I would like to see Jax's serious side. And unfortunately, we never get to see that one. So now, let's dive into the voice lines so I can show you what I mean.
Yeesh, Aatrox. I thought war gave me issues.
See, most of these voice lines are fine. They make sense within Jax fighting other warriors who are just egoistic, which especially becomes true when fighting someone like Aatrox.
Facing the Ascended again. This ought to be good.
Then he has this line against all the Ascended, which are the ones who destroyed his home. One would think he would be a little bit more emotional about that one.
You are everything I stand against, Void Empress. You'll go no further.
And then he has voice lines against someone like Belveth, who represents the force that destroyed his home kingdom. And still, he just doesn't really show emotions.
Your terror bears no teeth against me, Cho'Gath.
At least when it comes to this Cho'Gath line, it feels a little bit more heroic. And then it goes back to this one.
Darken, twisted by Shurima, fallen to the void, bound to your weapon. I get it.
Like, I really like the voice. I'm just not sure about the delivery. Am I the only one who feels like this? It feels like every line Jax delivers, it has the exact same emotion and the exact same feel. It almost feels like he would be devoid of all emotions, even though I'm pretty sure that was not Riot's intention. He is not a person who would be so scarred by war that his emotions would vanish. It's the exact opposite. It is his passion that encouraged him to reunite the warriors to fight back the void. But purely in my opinion, I don't really feel that passion.
Fiora, ready for a rematch?
Like, even in this one, he is clearly challenging her, but his voice just says he doesn't really care. It's kinda like every time he responds, he says, whatever.
Ikathia! There, a battle cry before you're beat down, Garen.
See, now he's shouting and it immediately goes back to, whatever.
Hey, Gragas! What do you say you and I grab a drink after this?
And then when he's not fighting, he's excited to drink. Which, by the way, this is a reference to his original lore where he was a drinking buddy with Gragas.
Oh, if it isn't the whippersnapper and a void rapper. Care to spar?
Now, of course, this one is a reference to Kai'Sa being mutated by the void, while Jax is all about fighting the void. That's really it.
Kassadin, alone against the void's only a matter of time before it gets to you.
He then has this line, which is very similar, but still, I feel like Jax should just care more. He's on a quest to destroy the void and help people fight against it. So when he meets Kassadin, I would expect him to actually try and sway him away from using things such as the Netherblade. Because Jax saw what the void is capable of. He knows wielding it is not fun. But here there are no signs of fear, no hesitation, not even a tiny pause. And that's all after Jax witnessed the destruction of his home. Instead, the line says, "Don't do it, kid. It's gonna be bad."
Kale. Being so self-righteous takes all the fun out of fighting.
Again, I'm kinda making fun of this and it is all totally subjective, so maybe you guys like it. But to me, I was expecting Jax's serious side. Of which, we actually got one! I mean, listen to this one.
Prophet of the Void? Bet you didn't see this coming.
I mean, it's okay, I guess. He also does have some obvious lines referencing people who are around him, like Cassante because Ikathia and Nazuma are quite close. He also talks to Zillion because they are both from Ikathia, but he also does have this line which actually feels genuine.
I don't hold grudges, Shuriman, but I don't hold back either.
I actually felt this one. I felt like the Shuriman Empire was his enemy and he knows that the civilians may not be part of it. But then it all goes back to jokes.
Couldn't even defeat me as a literal sword, Aatrox.
What's crazy is that in the middle of all of these, he does get some of his original voice lines back. And when he delivers those lines, they are great, because they are following the original direction.
Imagine if I had a real weapon. Who wants a piece of the champ?
A little bit darker, a little bit more gruesome, a little bit more real. And then, it goes all back to jokes again.
Keep your empire to yourself, Feathers.
So overall, his voice lines kind of feel like an announcer is speaking, which is fine, but yeah, it's just fine. But you see, at this point, you might think that I'm being a jerk about this, that the voice lines are totally fine and that I'm just nitpicking. Well, that is possible, but it could also be that I witnessed the other side. I have witnessed Jax's true potential. The one that was revealed in the Japanese dub.
生かしや最後の明かり防衛の最前線ボイドの子らよ本当の武器じゃなくて助かったなさあ戦え
Yeah, can we get some of that enthusiasm in our English dub?